Welcome to the Dubcast with Dubside. This is Dubcast number 64. I'm going to tell you about the Greenland National Kayaking Championships 2024. I had been attending the championships on an annual basis, and I'd gone for maybe 10 years in a row until COVID put a stop to that. So at this point, I had not been to Greenland in about 5 years. Some things were different, some things were the same, some of the people were different, some of the people were the same. I'll tell you all about it. In Dubcast 63, I described just getting to the competition, which is quite an adventure in itself. So now I'll tell you what happened when I got there. And unlike in past years, this time I had a mission. I was going to record interviews for special guest editions of the podcast, which I hadn't done back in the day since I didn't have the podcast back then. And also, Kayak USA, that's QAJAQ USA, the organization in the U.S. that promotes traditional kayaking and supports the Greenland kayaking group. Kayak USA had made a special position called the Greenland Ambassador. And they wanted me to go this year to Greenland and find new people to bring as special guests to the U.S. And the primary criteria was if they can speak English well. They also wanted me to buy some auction items to bring for the U.S. events to be auctioned off, kind of special things that you can't get in the U.S. And they gave me some money for this. Those were my objectives. To compete in the competition, that was not really that important. If they wanted me to help out with some of the judging, I was available to do that. I was also hoping to see a number of different people I hadn't seen in a long time. Normally, I like to get to the competition several days before it actually starts, and that gives me a chance to settle in when things are calm and less hectic, because when all the other teams arrive, things kick in a high gear, there's a lot going on, and you don't get a chance to do some of the things you were planning on doing. But this time, my intentions to get there early did not happen due to weather delays, and I arrived on the second day of the competition when they were holding the harpoon throwing event. So I'm walking down the street and find somebody in charge, seeing all kinds of familiar faces, people saying hi, happy to see me. And they make arrangements to give me a ride to the school, which is, I don't know, maybe a mile away, half a mile or something, with my luggage to get settled in there. And that's where I meet a guy named Inutsiak Olsen, who's a pretty cool dude. He's from the town of Ilulissat, farther north. And I had met him before in 2011. I stayed at his house. His mother is Angerslak Olsen, who is a noted kayaker who's won the women's title a number of times. He comes from a kayaking family. Both his parents very involved in kayaking. And when I met him in 2011, he was 10 or 11 years old. So now he's a grown man, about 22. And as I recall, when I stayed at his house in 2011, he was an eager little kid showing me his football posters. This is soccer in America, but football other places. That football players, internationally known players, that's what he was really into. Greenland, they know about organized sports around the world. And he could sort of speak English back then, but now he can speak English quite well. Now, another thing that happened back in the past, they used to put the teams up in classrooms in the school, because in the summertime they don't use the school, so it's an available building. And each team from each town would get its own classroom, so you could separate them that way. But sometime, I think it was maybe about 2012, something had happened where it's sports teams in general, not just the kayak teams, but they stay at the local school, the teams from the other towns. So some school had their classrooms trashed. I don't know the details of that situation, but the result was that schools in general decided we're not going to allow the teams to use the classrooms anymore. And so like every team got blamed for one team doing that. So that year for kayaking, they said, you don't get classrooms. We'll have the gymnasiums available. One big room for everybody. And so they bring out a stack of mattresses, these thin little cot mattresses, and you find yourself a mattress, find yourself a spot on the floor, and it's all like you're in barracks or something with everybody else. And the bathroom shower situation can get interesting, but this is the incentive for some of the foreigners who'd come in past years would just pay for a better place to stay because those accommodations weren't to their liking. But I've stayed on the gym floors many times. So by now, in 2024, I guess that situation with the memories of trashed classrooms had passed, so that now we were getting classrooms again. So the Ilulissat team, they bring a lot of people, they were assigned 2 classrooms. And Inutsiak said that due to the same delays I ran into, most of the Ilulissat team had also gotten stuck in somewhere north. So they had one whole empty classroom that he said I could use. And that sounded good to me. There's another awkward situation which comes about due to the keys to the rooms. They usually give one key to each team, and somebody can lock the door when everybody leaves to go to an event. But if some people are coming back, then maybe one person has the key and other people don't have the key. So if you've got other people in your room and the key is being passed around, you get into these very uncomfortable situations where you get back from, say, being in the water rolling and you want to get dried off, but your room is locked and you have to wait for somebody with a key to show up, and that can be very disconcerting. Well, Inutsiak had 2 keys, and both of them went to both of the rooms that Ilulissat had. So he gave me 1 set of keys, which made me very happy. And I say set of keys because you had 1 key to the door to the room, and the other key was to the shower. And these showers were in a different building, so you had to go outside and cross a courtyard to go take your shower, which is the showers under the gym. There's men's and women's like locker room sort of thing. And as I recall, this is the gym that we all stayed in 2014, I think it was. But now they're letting the teams use the classrooms again. So I got my stuff secured and then headed back down to the harbor outside the Kayak Tokatok Club where they're holding the competition. Now, I didn't bring any kayak or paddle or any wetsuit, dry suit, any of that gear. But they offered me a kayak to use to throw the harpoon in the harpoon competition. And they had a harpoon and a norsok to go with it. So I figured I'd give it a shot. So wearing my street clothes and taking off my shoes to fit into the skin-on frame, they gave me a competition number to wear so the judges can see who it is at a distance. I got to take 1 or 2 practice throws off on the side, but then I lined up with everybody else and came to throw, and trying to go for that extra distance and really throwing hard, the norsok stuck to the harpoon, which means they both come falling down very close to the kayak, and terrible throw, looked awful. And the way they were doing it this time, as soon as you throw the distance shot, then you grab the harpoon, and paddle up to the accuracy target. So I did that, and the same thing happened, a terrible throw. Well, I figured on the second throw I can just do it a little bit easier so that doesn't happen. Except that I then found out that they had changed the rules. You only get one throw for distance and accuracy. That's it. So my terrible throws, that was my competition. And I didn't even qualify for a medal. Pretty bad. In close to a similar vein, on the second day was the short distance race. And they offered me a kayak and a paddle, so I decided to take them up on it. And competing in the over 35, maybe my division was the over 50, something like that. I just got in the water to paddle. I just wanted to have fun doing that. So my group takes off the starting line, and I paddle for what I'm worth. Normally I have a decent sprint, I think, but the pack quickly gets ahead of me, and despite my efforts, I continue to slip behind. And I don't know if I can blame the kayak or not, but anyway, I did what I could. I was second to last, not the very end, but close to it. And so I did qualify, and I got a medal in whatever category they stuck me in on that one. And what that means is you have to stick around when they hand out the medals, the awards ceremony, which can take quite a long time. And you thought you'd had the evening off to go chill out somewhere, but you got to stand there and cheer for all the different people have to come up and get their medals. It's part of the deal. And this is going on usually every day because there's an event every day. So it's a lot of activity going on. The hurry up and wait situation is encountered quite a bit. But I had more important matters to think about. I'd already picked out Ilulissat as somebody to interview. I could see he could speak English fairly well. Very nice personality, some kayak skills, kayak family, so he would make a good guest to bring to a U.S. event. Now, I could have just taken a still shot of him, got his email address, and come back to Kayak USA and said, here's somebody you should consider. But since I was being paid to do this, I wanted to be a bit more professional about it. So I figured I need to take video interviews of these people. And in order to get a nice, clean video, a nice, clear audio, since I had a whole classroom to myself, I figured I could convert it into a studio to record nice, quiet interviews. So I did. I do need to say that it is somewhat of a challenge to pull somebody aside and talk to them for up to half an hour while all this activity is going on. But my classroom was on the way to the dining area where the meals were being served in the evening, so I was able to intercept people. So I got Ilulissat, half-hour interview, and I also talked to a woman named Ida Nielsen. She's going to be a special guest if you haven't heard that one already. Interviewed her for about an hour. Here's a little sample of what these interviews sounded like.
My name is Ilulissat. Gideon Andersen Olsen.
All right. And you grew up in Ilulissat?
Yeah.
And how did you learn English?
I started to play video games as a young age. Was very interested in English movies.
My name is Ida Nielsen. I'm originally from Denmark, and I moved to Nuuk, Greenland, 3.5 years ago.
Okay. And what do you do there when you're not?
I work for the parliament in Inatsisartut.
Okay. And you've been involved with Kayak Nuuk?
I have, yes, ever since I came actually. Yeah, I've been a member of the club.
While the competition events are going on, they've got the kids divisions and the teen divisions and the adult divisions. I'm taking time out to do other things that I would have done if I'd gotten there a few days ahead of time, like go to the store and buy some food, check out the museum, bookstores, libraries, gift shops, all the tourist stuff. If you recall in episode 46, I described the Dubside breakfast. Now, when I'm traveling, it's not always possible to make my breakfast. It requires a stove and a good pot with a right lid for it, and a supply of hopefully fresh vegetables. Now, this year when I flew into Narsarsuaq after the delay, Narsarsuaq is the airport town, and there's one little shop. And I walked to it while I was staying there overnight. And the vegetable selection is poor. The stuff they have on the shelf at full price is the stuff in this country we'd have marked at a discount because it's going bad. The stuff they have in Greenland marked at a discount is the stuff in this country would already be in the compost bin. Now, before you take away that stereotype, I'll have to note that was Narsarsuaq. You can't expect very much in an airport town like that. But in Qaqortoq has a number of food stores, several little shops, and then 2 big food stores in the middle of town. And the selection there is somewhat better. You have things that could be considered fresh. But the prices, for example, I was looking for spinach. And all they had was a average-sized bag of spinach, which in this country, you could get that at the bargain stores for, $2 or less sometimes. At a regular supermarket, maybe $4, not more than $5 for a bag of spinach. Greenland, 50 Danish kroners. That's about $8. I did finally figure out a way to get some reasonably fresh vegetables in Greenland. And I should have figured this out 20 years ago. Frozen vegetables. Peas, green beans, carrots, corn, Brussels sprouts, spinach, kale. Go past all the frozen meat and fish, and you will find a good selection of frozen vegetables. Well, back in 2014, the last time I was in Qaqortoq, there was a craft shop where guys are making the things that end up in the tourist shops. And I had a nice interaction with a guy named Taji. And I wrote his name down. It turns out this craft shop was right close to the school I was staying at. So at some point, I think when the children were competing or something I figured I could afford to miss, I went over to the craft shop and went in there. There was only one guy in there that morning, and he took one look at me and he said, "I know you." It was Taji, and he remembered me from 10 years ago. Well, I hung out with him for more than an hour, interviewed him. You'll hear him as a special guest. Sounded a little bit like this. I'm in Qaqortoq, and I'm talking to Chagi. Did you grow up here in Qaqortoq?
I'm born here
Yeah?
63 years ago, and I've been here always, except 2 times in Denmark for education.
Okay. As you'll hear in the interview, he carves these little figures that represent something out of Greenland history, which explains why the Norse are not there anymore. He does these carvings out of cedar driftwood that he collects himself. And so before I left, I bought one of these sets he had there available, a larger one. He had a smaller and a larger one. The larger one cost me 800 Danish kroners, using Kayak USA money, and that is a good deal more than $100. About a month later, those items went on the auction table at the traditional paddlers gathering in Minnesota. The winning bid was, I think it was $350. In the next day or two, as the competition continues to go, a motorboat pulls into the harbor, and, I don't know, maybe 6 to 10 people get off. And it's announced over the PA system that this is some more of the Ilulissat team arriving. So people give a good cheer to welcome them to Qaqortoq. It takes me a moment or two to realize that they're going to be needing to stay somewhere at the school, and I guess I'm in their room. I had turned that room into my own personal recording studio and had tables and chairs I brought in, wet pants from the short distance race that are all over the windowsill to dry, food spread out all over the counter, and generally I'm spread out far and wide like the room is all mine. So I go running back to the room to condense all the stuff down and push it into one little corner. And I'm thinking that maybe they'll squeeze into the other room that Ilulissat and the people that already came are in. And that'll be all still the Kayak Ilulissat team, and I'll have my own private room. But no, they grabbed a bunch of mattresses from the pile in the hallway and rolled all their luggage into my room, and we all shared it together. And that was the end of my private recording studio. Well, the people from Ilulissat that I was now sharing a room with, there was 4 or 5 adults and 4 or 5 kids, very young kids. The kids were, I think, too young to have seen me before, but the adults all knew me. I'd seen them several times over the years. Some of them could speak a bit of English, so it was pretty cool. One of them was Rita Jensen, who I've described before. In Dubcast 49, I described the team songs and team chants from the different towns. And Rita was the woman from Ilulissat who would scream out. That was her trademark sound. I also described the Hartache chant, which I think was pioneered by Abel Jacobson. And Abel is still very much involved and was the chief local organizer this year at the competition. And they were making good use of their Heartache cheer throughout the week. And maybe you recall in episode 56 about the old seal hunter, there was a local Hartache guy named Oli. And I had said that when I get back to Hartache, I'm hoping to find him again. I'd seen him every year I go to Hartache. There's Oli there. So I was looking around for him. He was definitely on my agenda for people to find. And by this particular day, I still hadn't found him. So I'll get back to you on that. Stay tuned, as they say. Another person I was hoping to catch up with and find the latest about. Well, let me preface this with a warning. This particular story does not have a happy ending. Okay? That same previous episode, number 37, which talks about the different group chants from the different towns, I described a kid named Isaias Bertelsen. And I can rewind you back to that episode right now, and you can hear what I said. Well, kids come and go, get involved, and then lose their interest. And a couple years after that, in 2014, new face came to the competition, a kid from Sisimiut, and his name was Isaias Bertelsen. And as far as developing your own trademark sound, Isaias Bertelsen took it to a whole nother level. And Isaias was only like 12 or 13 years old. He would really get into it. He'd be waving his hands up and down and twisting around and getting quite animated. And as soon as he finished, he would stop and calmly go back to his posture from before as if nothing happened. And the following year, Isaias came back again, and the year after that. And people became very much accustomed to his little sound, and people started to chant along with him and really get into it. And he became quite the popular character. On the final night of the dinner, there's a stage and there's a microphone and there's a band that plays later on, and the people make announcements and they give out the medals and things. And so while people are eating at various times, somebody might get up on the mic and add some extra thing, or they'll tell funny jokes or something like that. Isaias, with encouragement, got up on stage to give the definitive version of his trademark chant. And this kid has got skills. Before he did it, he takes his hat off and he holds it upside down. He says, and then he walks the entire circuit of the room for donations. And people are pulling out the kroner coins and bills and stuff. And the hat was full to the top by the time he got back to the stage. So he had the business angle covered. And looking back over the record of the competition, he never got a medal in anything. But the thing is, he didn't have to. He had made his mark. He'd made more than made his mark. I think he commanded a level of respect that a lot of the people his age with gold medals weren't getting. Okay, the rewind is over. I'm not going to play you his trademark chant. If you want to hear that, you'll have to go back to episode 37. So here we are in episode 64, talking about my trip to Greenland in July of 2024. Well, I didn't expect to see Isaias at the kayak competition because I figured he'd long since stopped kayaking and gone on to other things, but I could see he had a lot of potential. He instinctively knew how to work a crowd, had a very engaging persona. I'd expect him to have a future in television, radio, or on stage, something in the public eye. Kind of person who could become such an institution that you'd be able to say, I knew him back in the day when he was just a kid on the street doing chants at the kayak competition. But like in any culture, you have too much fame and fortune too fast, and you throw alcohol and drugs into the equation, and bad things can happen. So that was my assessment of Isaias Bertelsen. A lot of talent, a lot of potential, as long as he was able to stay on the straight and narrow. Well, I don't remember exactly who I was talking to, but one day in a conversation I mentioned Isaias and said, what's he doing now? I was told that the year before, 2023, he had a fight with his girlfriend who threw him out of wherever they were staying. He did not have anywhere else to go to at the time. And he solved that problem by committing suicide. If you've been following all the podcasts I've done, you know this is not the first time we've encountered death or death by suicide. It doesn't make it any less troubling, though. The song at the end of Dubcast 37 incorporates a sample of Isaias doing his little trademark chant. And in a different reality, I would have hoped that would be used at the kayak competition and played and enjoyed, but as the way things have turned out, I think I'll just retire that song. If you want to hear it, you can go back and listen to it at the end of Dubcast 37. On perhaps a somewhat more positive note, I went looking for the relatives, descendants of the old seal hunter I talked about in episode 56, Ephraim Adolphson. In 2014, James Mankey and James Roberts stayed at a hostel up on the hill overlooking the center of Kokotok, and they said that the woman there was the niece of Ephraim Adolphson, and I think I could recall going and talking briefly there. So this year, I trudged up the hill. It took me a while to find that hostel. I think they had different sign or different, something was different about it, but I finally found the place. And it said Heidi Moot Cafe, which is sort of like Heidi's Cafe. And so I walked in there, and a woman came and she took one look at me, just like Taji did. And she said, "I know you." She could remember me 10 years later. Well, I told her about my whole project that involved her uncle, and she said she would try to get in touch with some of his kids who still live there in Kokotok and set up a meeting for all of us together. So that meeting did come off, and I will tell you about that in episode 65 of the Dubcast with Dubside.